Hello, my name is Alina. I'm Dubai property expert. I decided to start a set of videos to answer the most frequently asked questions about what type of rentals is there in Dubai, what are the responsibilities of a tenant, what are the rights and responsibilities of a landlord, who can buy properties in which areas, what type of areas are there, which are the liquid ones, the most in demand ones, and so on and so forth. So if you're already a property owner in Dubai, or you're just thinking of acquiring a property here, you'll be thinking about renting it most probably if it's an investment. And the question is, shall you rent it long term or short term? So let's discuss about the differences, the benefits and the drawbacks. If you talk about the long-term rental, the long-term rental is registered in Ijari register to avoid double rental or fraud cases. So the rental contract is regulated by Dubai Land Department, and any further, God forbid, rental disputes will be handled by Dubai Land Department. Whereas the short-term rental is governed by DTCM, Dubai Tourism and Commerce Marketing. So what are the differences between them and what are the benefits for the landlords? If you take the long-term rental, first of all, it's the fact that you're getting your money upfront. So most common is that the tenant will come and rent from you the property in an average of 4 checks. So you're getting paid every quarter. You will be receiving your checks as a post-dated checks. So basically the first check will be current dated and the subsequent will be every quarter. Or else it will be 1 check up front, it will be 6 checks, it may even be 12 checks. It depends on the agreement with the tenant. In this case, your benefit is that you are renting the property for the full year, and if the tenant is willing to exit this arrangement, it will be a penalty fee, and the tenant has to notify you 60 days before the early contract termination. At the same time, the tenant has to give you 90-day notice if he doesn't want to renew the tenancy contract for the subsequent year. What are the threats? The threats are that the tenant may miss payments. So if you get to deal with bounce checks, you cannot evict the tenant straight away. You'll have to deal with it through the procedures. You should go to the notary public and notify the tenant that he should pay within the 30 days the pending payment. Only after that you can start the procedure if the tenant failed to pay. However, most of the time the landlord and the tenant, they will have mutual agreement. Suppose the tenant delayed the funds, or the tenant is reasonable and is willing to pay, then you'll not really reach to the court cases. But if you deal with unreasonable tenants, then you are sort of locked with this long-term rental contract, because you will not be able to evict the tenant. We had a case, for example, when a tenant rented a property in his name and he illegally subleased the property and collected the money from the subleasee and escaped. When we found the subleasee in the apartment, we were not able to evict him. He continued living for 1 year in the apartment, as long as the rental dispute committee approved tenant's eviction. But overall, it's safe in Dubai to deal with long-term tenants. Just you have to do your due diligence and to check tenant's profile to make sure you're dealing with a reasonable individual. When it comes to short-term rentals, most of the landlords, they don't have time to deal with short terms, because you have to register your apartment with TCM. You have to get the permission, and then you have to get bookings. Either you're dealing with a client with a tenant who is willing to rent on a monthly basis, let's say it's a corporate client who doesn't have a checkbook, or it's here on a short-term contract and doesn't want to commit for a full 1 year. So in these cases, you'll have your property rented on a short term. Many landlords are putting it on Airbnb and they are taking bookings for even shorter than this. And some landlords, they prefer to delegate this task to companies which are DTCM certified. Just make sure that you check companies' credentials and you read carefully their contract, because some of the companies have proven themselves in the market to be not really reliable and not really transparent. So that's why be careful with whom you're dealing. At the same time, we have an experience of dealing with really good short-term rent companies. What will be my suggestion when you're talking about long-term and short-term? First of all, for short term, you have to furnish your apartment. It's not only about the soft furniture, it's also about the cutleries, the towels, and many other small items to make it compliant with the hotel apartment style. Because your apartment will be inspected prior to giving you the right of taking any bookings. With the long term, you don't have to deal about all this. In short term, you have to keep the bills on your name, all the utilities on your name, which is internet, which is water, electricity, AC, gas, and so on. In long term, you don't have to deal with all that. It will be all the responsibility of the tenant. In short term, you get the flexibility of pulling your unit out anytime. So if you want to start living in your unit, if you want to use it for your relatives, let's say, suppose you don't like the tenant, you can terminate this agreement quite quickly. So in long term, on the contrary, you are locked for 1 year and you are sort of exposed to tenant breaching its commitments. But on another hand, you're guaranteed that your unit will not be empty in the lower months or in the lower seasons. In terms of payment, the short-term properties, they're usually gaining you 10 to 15% more than the long-term properties, because the rates which are assigned to short-term properties should be generally 20% lower than the hotels in the neighborhood. Another difference is that long-term properties can be in any area of Dubai, because you'll pretty much find a tenant for any area in Dubai. Whereas the short-term properties, they are mainly liquid in the touristic areas like Dubai Marina, Palm Jumeirah, Jumeirah Lake Towers, downtown, and the upcoming new areas. So if you have a property, let's say in Sport City or Jumeirah Village Circle, you'll not be able to target tourists over there, or let's say you'll be less exposed to the chance of targeting tourists. What is your take on rental types in Dubai? Comment under this video. Do you prefer to rent your property on short term or long term? Are you looking to have a property? If you were to have one, would you rent it on a short term or long term? By the way, to mention, short-term rental, it's a good addition to those who are becoming tax residents in Dubai. So basically the bank will ask you to prove your residency and to prove it by the bills. So you can keep the bills running on your name, but you don't have to necessarily live in the property. So you can rent it to the short-term rental tenant. So as I said, every rental type has its own benefit and its own threat. I'll wait to hear from you about your experience, about your suggestions, and let me know which other topics do you want me to cover in the subsequent videos. Thanks a lot for watching. Goodbye.